A tactic of any true critical thinker is to maximize the perspectives with which they observe a problem. Today, we're going to do just that. We're going to interview rock star broker Sam Kline from Gastonia, North Carolina.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
Today I have broker Sam Kline with me, and I want to tell you a quick story Sam is not prepared for, which I'm excited to tell. One reason why I knew I liked Sam instantly is because I hadn't even met the guy in person yet. I think we maybe talked on the phone a little bit. But you disagreed with how I was getting to your office. Do you remember that? Like, our first conversation was a disagreement about how was the best way to get to your office from where I was located at. And I instantly knew we were going to be buddies because I'm like, if this dude is willing to disagree with me about directions, this is going to be a friendship, and I'm excited for it.
You know what, Ryan? I think that you wanted to take the conventional route to my office, and I wanted to convince you that there was a better back way to go. I've been accused of speaking my mind, but what can I say? That is who I am. So
I love it. Well, let's jump right into this. Let's start by talking about the market. Those 10 caps, man, they're just everywhere, aren't they?
I would be listing a lot more mobile home parks if I could get people to consider a 10 cap. But
from the seller standpoint.
Absolutely, from the seller standpoint. The cap rates have really gotten compressed. There's a lot of optimism out there. And so, no, a 10 cap is very, very hard to find these days. And
if you even find it, it's loaded with all sorts of issues.
It is. A lot of people that own the asset have some deferred maintenance issues. Plenty of times they're not holding the asset correctly. For example, they own plenty of the homes themselves, and that makes their rent higher, but they also inherit issues with owning the homes, and they don't recognize that as a problem, and yet they still want to sell it at that premium cap rate. So
because they're sitting on gold, man.
Yeah.
Solid gold. Can you blame them, though? I mean, the amount of calls and it doesn't take a genius to get 5 cards in the mail from 5 different people wanting to buy their asset for them to go, hey, maybe I'm sitting on an opportunity here.
No, I can't. If I was going to sell something, I'm going to try to sell it for the most money possible. And so since they have gotten bombarded with opportunities to sell, that only makes the price go up.
So now from your perspective, let's talk about your most recent listing. What type of responses did you get? What timing did you get? And who?
I listed a park out in Bessemer City, North Carolina. It was all park-owned homes with a couple stick-built homes on the property, 3 separate parcels, well and septic. I listed it, and I had a strong offer within 48 hours. I probably had at least 50 inquiries via email. I'm seeing a big range of people. There are people that have cash, and that's always, of course, the best way to close a mobile home park. Financing can be a little trickier. There's some people who really are in way over their head. I can tell right away they want to buy the asset, but they really don't have enough of a down payment. They've never done it before. My advice to them is to really think about the smaller parks. It's just a smaller bite. It's a smaller cash outlay. It's easier to manage. They're going to be doing everything themselves. And then I see some people that have the financing piece worked out. They've got the down payment ready. They have a lender or a set of lenders that they work with. They have a strategy, and so everything in between.
So who do you feel is coming in? I've heard rumors that disgruntled retail investors are coming into the industry. I've heard rumors of PE guys. I've heard who picks up the phone to call you as a broker?
I would, from my experience, I would say kind of everything in between. Got single guys that are or a group of a couple little practitioners that are just trying to get out there and get their feet wet. And then I've got big, heavy institutional, people with an office and a way of collecting money and a whole system set up. And that gets tricky because they tend to want to evaluate their overhead into the deal, and it's tough to make it fit. But they're out there, and their management system doesn't allow them to chase anything less than 40 or 50 units. They've got to have at least that, and they really prefer a couple hundred, because ultimately there's fixed costs that are going to exist with every park they take on. So those are like your big dogs that have a big capital fund and can come in and overpay a little bit and can write checks for the parks. And then, if I'm dealing with someone who's saved their own money, it's a different deal. But again, everything in between.
So talk to me about how you feel the market is right now in terms of efficiency.
The market in every aspect, and I'm not just referencing mobile home parks, has really gotten very optimistic. And we're seeing cap rates get compressed really low. So to try and relate, what is a cap rate, which is always a tricky question. But why does someone have a 4 cap on a piece of property? If I'm selling an AutoZone that's a standalone building at a 4 cap because I've got a 20-year lease in place that's triple net, that involves the tenant dealing with all the maintenance, all the property taxes, etc., that's a really good guarantee. And that's what you're buying. You are buying a lease, and the physical property is like, let's just call it the insurance. The chances of AutoZone going bankrupt and not paying rent are slim. Even if they close that location, they're going to continue to pay rent on it. And so you really have that as that's what you're purchasing. And again, if they were to go bankrupt, you at least have a piece of property. That's your backup, which you could resituate. A mobile home park that trades at a 4, 5, 6 cap, to me that's a little bit crazy, because while they're a great asset, do you have a great guarantee that people are going to pay rent? No, there's a lot of turnover. There's issues. There's deferred maintenance. There's tricks to getting that thing up and running and making it smooth. So in my mind, that cap rate has to climb. It really doesn't deserve that low single-digit cap rate, but it happens. There's people out that, in my opinion, are overpaying, but they want to park their money in that asset, and that's what they're doing.
So you would almost argue it's efficient, but it's almost a little too. It's frothy.
Yeah, it's overly optimistic, in my opinion.
Love it. Let's move on to one big reason why you and I bond so well is because we're both natural salespeople. I did it for 4 years. You're in it. The one thing we couldn't agree more on is grit. Grit is by far and away the most important part of being a salesperson. Sure, having a sexy sales pitch like Billy Mays here with OxyClean. Yeah, the pitch is important. Don't get me wrong. It's a part of it, but overcoming objections and feeling people out and being able to build rapport is way more important. But you don't get that if you don't put yourself in that situation. And as luck would have it, not even an hour or two ago, you found out that a park that you had built the rapport, you'd overcome the objections. They were like, Sam, we're going to call you up when it's time to sell, and you're going to get our listing. And then they didn't.
So yes, to reference that situation, I worked for at least 2 to 3 months getting to know someone, understanding their asset, and even put a full cash offer in front of them, full price. They wanted an amount of money, and I found a buyer that was going to pay them. And ultimately, after months and months of working and attempting to negotiate, they ended up deciding they weren't going to sell. So we never actually got a signed contract. We did have a signed letter of intent, but the response was, we're just making a lot of money off it, and we're going to keep it for a while longer. And then, I was told, don't worry, if we decide to sell it, you'll be the first call. And of course, that's not the case.
We found it on the GIS.
The GIS, they had sold without me. And Ryan, the sports metaphor that I love is the quarterback who throws an interception. You got to go back in the next drive and still try to get your team to score a touchdown. You can't be sitting around worrying about the interception. So you dust yourself off, you get back up, and you continue doing what you do. I'll transition into the knocking doors part. We live in a time right now where so much genuine communication has gotten replaced by social media, texting. Even people don't even call each other anymore. They communicate in other mediums. And I'm not trying to down that or hate on that as much as I'm saying nothing replaces face-to-face contact and tangibleness. And so if you're going to try and convince someone to let you list their mobile home park, you need to go out and speak with them. You need to be a really good listener. One of the easiest things to do when it comes to getting in front of someone and talking to them about their mobile home park is to ask them how it got developed. Because 9 times out of 10, that person actually built the park themselves, or their parents built it and they helped in that, and they're very proud of that, and it means a lot for them to get to talk about that. So you cannot replace that tangible letting someone know that you're like a real person.
Well, I can't agree more on this. And this is my generation. It's technology's fault. It's our generation that we're going to have to deal with. It's easier to be a bully behind a text message or a computer screen. It's really difficult to go into a situation that's awkward, that's uncomfortable. And like I said, the one thing that you stood out in my mind was that you are willing to literally go to someone's front door and knock on the door. It's one thing to pick up the phone. If it goes bad, you hang up the phone, you make the next call. You are literally knocking on someone's front door. Hey, I'm Sam Kline. Can I have your listing? I admire the hell out of that.
I appreciate it. I've been accused of being very aggressive. I think it's my nature. But it's weird. When someone's tough on the phone, for whatever reason, it's tough. It's harder on me than going to see them. It's just kind of a natural piece. Like, I work the phone too, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of driving around, checking properties out, and talking with people. And that's one of the reasons I'm just kind of a natural fit for commercial real estate, because that part comes really easy to me. So, I get discouraged by sitting around making phone calls all day, and I get to a certain point and say, I'm getting in the car. I'm going to go knock on a door. I'm going to go try to meet someone. I'm going to go try to have a conversation. And you're turning over cards. The more you turn over, the better chance you have of making a match. So
I was talking to someone earlier who was like, oh, wow, you bought so many parks in such a short period of time. What's your secret sauce? My gut reaction was luck. Right place, right time, all 5 deals that I've closed. But here's the thing. I have also looked at way more opportunities than your average bear, because I put myself in those positions. So like Larry Bird used to say, the more I practice, the luckier I get. It's true. You have to put yourself in those situations, and it's almost like, what is the next guy not doing, right? So it's easy for me to send a postcard, because I can just send a postcard and hopefully they call me and they're nice. The next most uncomfortable, difficult thing to do is to actually pick up the phone where someone's like, take me off your list, I'll never sell on. And then take that one step further, it's knocking on their door unsolicited. I just have so much respect for that. And it's pushing your own comfort zone, and that's how you find success. You find a way to put yourself in the opportunity. Like in basketball, you have the open look. That doesn't mean it's going to go in. In fact, most shots in basketball don't. Even the professionals beyond the arc, they don't hit 50%, unless you're Steph Curry. And even then, he'll have games where he'll miss 8 in a row. I mean, it happens, So it's like, but by him putting himself in that situation and not getting discouraged and finding creative ways to take shots, that's the name of the game. That is a good transition into, once you have that opportunity, how do you overcome that objection? Can you talk to us about what objections you're facing and how you've overcome them? Try to overcome them.
I want to say it. I always heard it stated that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So maybe that's a way to summarize what you're talking about. What kind of objections? When someone has a mobile home park and it's operational, it's usually making them some pretty good money. So why are they selling? Why do they want to sell? And one of the most common pieces is, I lose my revenue stream and I have to pay capital gains tax. And there's not always a great answer for that, quite honestly. One thing that I haven't successfully convinced someone to do, but I have tried to use as a strategy, is to say, have you ever considered a different type of asset? And that's where we take the sale of a mobile home park and 1031 it into a triple net lease property. So what happens there? Let's say that I can sell my mobile home park for $1.2 million or $1.3 million, which puts me in the game to play in the triple net lease game. I could probably buy one of the cheaper properties that way, and I roll it over and do that. I'm probably cutting my income down, but I don't have to do any more work. I'm not taking care of anything. So if I own that mobile home park free and clear, and I can still survive off less money, I can park it into a different type of asset that requires a lot less of me. So if we take someone who's been managing it for a long time and they're kind of tired of it, that's a potential way to overcome that objection. What I would say is, I don't sell real estate, I solve problems. No one is going to sell unless they've got an issue that's come up. Some of it, Ryan, could just be fatigue. they're tired of taking care of the mobile home park. And you happen, again, this is the luck part, you happen to knock on their door, be willing to knock on their door, and differentiate yourself at just the right time. And what are you doing? You're solving a problem for them. They no longer want to take care of the park. Deferred maintenance, tons of deferred maintenance. They don't want to take that on. They're willing to sell the park at a price that allows you to bring it back to speed, and you're the one who's willing to do it. And you're not a letter, you're not a postcard, you're a person in front of them. So that's really the type of objections I run into.
And from my perspective, so we've closed on pretty much, every single one we've closed on has been an off-market deal. And the thing with off-market, the thing with an on-market deal is you, the broker, you have the listing. They're mentally ready to go. The thing with the off-market deals and the thing with you trying to get the listing is it's almost like arm wrestling. You just have to, first off, be persistent. And especially with people who are really, really, like you and I, we sat down and had coffee with that guy. And you listen to him for 45 minutes, you tell him the story about how you're Irish Catholic, and they love it, and they love you, and you're great, and everything's great, and then they want to sell for $1 bajillion, right? And you have to grind that out. And 9 out of 10 of those conversations go absolutely nowhere, and you sit back and you go, oh my gosh, did I just waste my time with this guy listening to his ridiculous stories and his ridiculous price? But here's the thing, 9 of those won't work out, but the one that does, it'll always shock you. Every single park I've closed, there's always a moment where I went, oh wow, how did I do this? And I was in the right place at the right time, and I persisted, and they went from, it's making money, I'll sell eventually, to eventually they're like, all right, let's do it. And the key to that is being persistent and knowing that 9 out of 10 of them are just going to fall flat. But you get that one, and it makes all the difference in the world. That being said, let's transition into the last bit, which is contrarianism. We were talking about that earlier. How can we help my listeners kind of differentiate themselves? How do you, as a broker, assess a potential buyer's ability to close? Because in this frothy market, I'm sure you get a ton of people calling you, a ton of offers once you have that listing. How could I stand out, or one of our listeners stand out to you when everyone wants this regurgitated cookie cutter? How do you be different? How do you know I can close?
One thing that I've tried to push people towards, and I usually get some resistance, is the idea that you've got to get outside that little cookie cutter box. So you and I were talking earlier, and I probably exaggerated a little bit, but I've got hundreds of people in my inbox that want a certain type of park, 40 or more units, all tenant-owned homes, all city utilities. And 2 things about that. If I can get one of those listed, it's going to be very expensive. I can assure you of that. Secondly, I've got tons of those people. I've got tons of those people in my inbox that are willing, that have the ability to close. So how do you differentiate yourself to me as a broker that's going to make me want to give you a heads up when I've got a potential listing, is to say, I'm willing to take on some challenges. I don't need a park that's perfect. I recognize I can take a park that has issues and create the perfect park, and call me when you have that deal that all the other people are going to turn their nose up at. I think that's kind of like a microcosm for a life approach. Be willing to work a little harder. Be willing to think a little bit differently. I mean, there's so many people who want that asset. It's silly. Be the person who's going to take the asset and change it a little bit, or do it differently and appeal to the tenants differently and make a great park. I think that it should almost be exciting to you to want to create that. It's a little bit of art, if you will. So that's what I look for. Someone who's not going to discount a park that has some work, that needs some work.
So when I started with Ian a couple years back, we were 2 20-somethings with not a whole lot of money, not a whole lot of experience. How could we differentiate ourselves? One thing we did was we're willing to sacrifice and do things others aren't. And that's the value we're going to bring to the table. Mobile home parks, that was just our medium with which we were going to achieve our dreams. And one thing that you did recently, which I found fascinating and really cool and hit home for me, is you talked about how in Mount Holly you can get a building for nothing. And to me, I wasn't born into riches. I didn't have $1 million loan from my dad when I called him up at 22. I grinded out for the better part of a decade to have enough to just barely get started. Talk to me about that article you wrote and tell us how someone like little old me in my 20s with no experience, with a little bit of money, could actually buy a building, because that's really cool.
Yeah, I wrote an article. It was in the Gaston Gazette, and what I was trying to point out is when you go into Charlotte, when you go downtown into Charlotte, and you're watching an apartment complex be built that has 300 units and common spaces and a pool on the roof deck and a parking garage and bedrooms. A bedroom is $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month. That is not a person. That's a REIT all day long, or some other investment group that's super capitalized. They can overpay for land. They can hire a general contractor. They can hire a fancy architect. And they do. They create a really cool asset. And if you're not in a REIT, you're out. There is no way a young guy like yourself or like myself is going to go downtown and compete in that market. We will get crushed. The thing about having tons of capital is not only can you overpay and hire all kinds of fancy practitioners to get your job done, you can also operate in the red for a while. Some of us have to eat and put gas in our car, and those people, that's not what they're doing. Ultimately, they weather the storm, they fill the place up, and they have this great asset that performs. So if you're a regular guy, what can you do? What you have to recognize is that there's a fringe to Charlotte that has some great opportunities, and that was where my article came in and said, look, you can come buy a building in Mount Holly at $60 and $70 a square foot. You want to go down to the south end of Charlotte, you're at $250 and $300 a square foot. You can take that building is probably in fair to even poor condition. And poor condition, you can even push that square footage price down to $30 and $40. And people don't want to buy it because it needs work. It takes effort. You're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to think outside of the box. You might have to do a few things yourself to save the money to build it back up. But it's out there. Gastonia, which is really a city within itself. It's the biggest city in Gaston County. Has 75,000 people. Has some really cool stuff going on downtown. It's slowly developing. The Fuse District, if anyone's heard of that, Franklin Urban Sports and Entertainment. They're going to have the Gastonia Grizzlies play there. Eventually want to make it like a concert venue, some things like that. The Luray Mill project is 600,000 square feet. Someone parked $40 million in that. Residences and commercial spaces, and just a really cool piece. And then there's downtown, and I sold a building just recently, 8,000 square feet, all masonry, 2 levels. I think we were at about $35, $36 a square foot. So rents are low. It needs work, but the guy's going to come in. He's going to slowly change it and raise rents, and he's going to have a cool asset. So those pieces are out there. And Ryan, it just takes someone to think uncommonly, probably as much as anything, be willing to do work. Let me just kind of wrap up with one story about Mount Holly. I had a building that was vacant, boards on the windows, gutted on the inside. I had it listed at $99,900, which was right at about $30 a square foot. Roof leaked, but it was built in the 30s when they built things out of lots and lots of bricks. So it was a solid structure. I probably showed it 100 times, maybe better, I don't know. I showed it to a woman who wanted to do an art gallery there. She got so fired up. She loved the building. She ultimately bought it for $58,000. She came in, she got some grants from the city, she busted her tail, she fixed it, and it's amazing looking. It's incredible. And I take people all the time. I take people on tours, and I point to them, and I say, I sold that building for $58,000. And they're always like, oh, man, you should call me next time. And I'm thinking, I did. I called everybody, But this woman was willing to throw the sweat equity in and make it happen. And so there are opportunities out there in Gaston County big time. If any listeners want to reach out and get a tour and kind of look at some off-market stuff, and I'd love to hear from them. So
I think that's great, and I think applying that to mobile home parks, there's really 2 takeaways. Number one, people are looking for arbitrage. They're looking for quick, easy cash and low-risk cash, and the truth is the markets are pretty efficient. And number 2, the value is really where you can do something someone else can't. And if you showed something 100 times and one person came in and rolled up her sleeves and kicked some butt, she deserves that value that she created because she literally did something no one else was willing to do. And you can do that in the mobile home park space. You can also do that in other spaces. But ultimately, again, Ian and I, two 20-somethings trying to start a business. We're two entrepreneurs. We're trying to achieve our dreams through the medium of mobile home parks. This is one avenue with which you can go. But no matter what, you are always going to be working hard, and there's never going to be, or very rarely going to be, arbitrage. You're going to have to create that value. That's where the grit comes in. That's where the uncomfortable conversations come in. That's where all of that comes in. But to wrap everything up, really, in entrepreneurship, it's just like sales. Like we're salespeople. You find creative ways to make it happen. And I don't know who to credit this quote to, but I love it, and it's perfect for this episode. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. Otherwise, you'll find an excuse.
Yeah, that's great.
Did you find this episode helpful? If so, I need your help too. Drop me a 5-star review and some comments. Y'all, it helps a lot. Then afterwards, come pay me a visit on my website, archimedesgrp.com. I thoroughly enjoy connecting with you and helping you solve your problems. Seriously, let's connect.